All right, welcome back. Hope you're all having a great week. Today, we're continuing our RBT exam practice question series, where we're going through 10 RBT exam questions and breaking them down, how you should think about them on your actual exam. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. If you're looking for our proven study materials, please check out rbtexamreview.com. We offer 3 full practice exams, a task list study guide. Our combo pack comes with everything and flashcards. It's our best deal. And of course, we have our competency study guide as well. So be sure to check out all of those. Any questions, comments, please let me know. I'd love to help. Other than that, work hard, study hard. Let's get to our questions. Question 1. Grayson drops his food on the floor about 4 times per meal. At first, it appeared to be an accident, but now it seems on purpose. Now, when Grayson drops food on the floor, his mom takes away his dessert. Grayson is now dropping food on the floor about 1 time per meal. Mom's intervention is what? Okay, so if you've been studying a while, the first sentence you might have started thinking maybe something along the lines of measurement or rate, which would have been right. 4 times per meal indicates rate. However, what is our question asking? The question is asking about mom's intervention. And this is a good example of why you need to read the questions carefully and slowly, because you want to answer what the question is asking and not what you think you're getting from the information. Okay. So for this question, we want to know about mom's intervention. So what did mom do? Well, mom started taking away Grayson's dessert. And then what happened as a result? Did Grayson's behavior increase or did it decrease? Well, it went from about 4 times per meal to about 1 time per meal. So his behavior decreased. So is mom's intervention functioning as a reinforcer or a punisher? Well, a punisher, because a punisher decreases. So now we ask ourselves, okay, was something added or was something taken away? Well, mom taking away the dessert is taking away the stimuli or the stimulus. So is that going to be positive or negative? It's going to be negative. So if mom's intervention involves negative taking away, punishment, which is decreasing in his behavior, then mom's intervention is going to be what? It's going to be D, negative punishment. That's how you should approach every reinforcement and punishment question. First, ask yourself, did the behavior increase or did it decrease? If it increased, it's reinforcement. If it decreased, it's punishment. Then ask yourself, was something taken away or was something added? If something was taken away, it's negative. If something was added, it's positive. And then you just combine the two and you're going to find your answer. Once you start approaching punishment reinforcement questions that way, you'll never miss another one. Question 2. Your client's mom asks the BCBA and you to help teach the client how to pack their lunch. If the BCBA wants to learn what steps in the chain the client can do, the BCBA might use which of the following procedures? Okay, so what did you gather from reading that question? One of the biggest mistakes I see when people study for their RBT exam is they read the question too quickly. You should spend most of your time reading and analyzing the question and then going to your answer choices. You should have a good idea before you get to your answer choices what you might want to pick. So if we read this question again, we're looking at some sort of task chain, right? We want to teach the client how to pack their lunch. The BCBA wants to know what steps can they already do in that task chain. So if we want to break down and analyze this particular skill and make a task chain, what are we going to do? A, functional analysis. What is a functional analysis? A functional analysis is the best way for us to determine function of a behavior. It involves manipulation of antecedents and consequences. It's a very high level intervention that only BCBAs do. RBTs can assist in functional analysis, but it's one of the less common things you might ever see while working as an RBT. Okay. So obviously a functional analysis is not what we're looking for. What about a task analysis? What is a task analysis? A task analysis is breaking down steps or breaking down a task into steps to make a task chain. So if we are essentially breaking down how to pack their lunch into these steps and then evaluating the steps so we can make a proper chain, what are we doing? We're, of course, analyzing the task. So B looks like our answer. Always read all of your answer choices. Understand why the wrong answers are wrong. C, shaping. What is shaping? Shaping is successive approximation of behavior. Are we reinforcing successive approximations? No, there's no approximations going on. There's no reinforcement going on. If anything, we're probing, but probing isn't one of our answers, right? So C is out. And then D, differential reinforcement. Again, are we reinforcing one behavior and not another? No, we're simply probing these steps in this chain to see what our client can and can't do. We're analyzing the task of packing the lunch. Our answer is going to be B. So how I'm going through that question is how you should approach every practice question. Go through each answer choice. Ask yourself, what is the definition of this term? Does it apply? It's slow. It's a lot of work, but that's how you're going to get good at the exam. We don't need to rush through our questions. I'd rather you do 10 questions in an hour rather than 30 questions in an hour, because you're going to get a lot more benefit from doing those 10 questions slowly and reviewing those questions rather than just rushing through 30 questions in an hour. A client needs to earn 5 tokens to earn 10 minutes of iPad time. The first token is delivered after 2 responses, the second token after 3 responses, the third token after 4 responses, the fourth token after 2 responses, and the last token after 4 responses. What type of reinforcement schedule is this client on? Basic reinforcement schedule question. How do we break it down? First, let's ask ourselves, are we dealing with time or are we dealing with responses? Clearly, we're dealing with responses. Okay, it's the first token is delivered after 2 responses, etc. Is that going to be an interval schedule or a ratio schedule? It's going to be a ratio schedule. Responses are ratios, time is interval. So if we look at our answer choices, all we have available are ratio schedules. So that doesn't help us too much, right? So now we ask ourselves, are we dealing with a fixed amount of responses or an average amount of responses? Well, we're dealing with an average, right? The number of responses required to get a token keeps changing from 2 to 3 to 4, back to 2, back to 4. Fixed is F. The response requirement doesn't change. Variable is an average. V, the response requirement is changing. So obviously we're dealing with some sort of variable schedule here, a variable ratio schedule. So now all we need to do now is figure out our average. And how do we do that? Well, you add up all of your numbers, okay? So 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 2 plus 4 is 15, and divide by total data points to get your average, which is going to be 3. So what type of reinforcement schedule is this client on? A VR3. If you don't know how to find an average, okay, go back, brush up on that skill. It's very simple, very straightforward, but you need to know it as an RBT. You might be finding averages for data collected, and they might ask you to find an average on the exam. This is not the easiest question in the world, right? It took 2 or 3 steps to get there. But if you were able to answer this question, I would say you have a very good grasp on reinforcement schedules. So be happy about that. The CEO of a small marketing firm wants to know how many questions his salespeople ask on their sales calls. What type of measurement would be best for this? Okay, be careful here. Kind of a tricky one. We are looking at what? We're looking at how many questions. Immediately, what do you think of? Well, I think of a count. I think of responses. I don't think of time. So if we're not dealing with time, what can we eliminate? We can clearly eliminate duration because duration always deals with time. And we can eliminate latency because latency deals with time in between the SD and the first response. We're not worried about how long the sales calls last, and we're not worried about how long it takes to answer the first question. We want to know how many questions on their calls. So that leaves us with frequency and rate. Now, frequency and rate are related. Frequency is our count. What is rate? Rate is frequency with the time component added. Rate is going to be more specific than frequency. So in this case, yes, we could use frequency, right? I could count how many questions each salesperson asks on each call and get a number. But what would be better than that? What if I found out how many questions per call they make? That's even better. So rate is going to be the better option here. Okay. So we're going to have our frequency, which is the number of questions. And then we add our time component, which is in this case calls, right? If we have an average of 5 questions per call, that's more valuable than just knowing, well, John asks 5 questions, Tim asks 5 questions. We can get a better idea of the rate of questions per call rather than just the count. Okay. So be very careful with frequency and rate, right? If rate is available, it's typically going to be better than frequency. The parents of your client just got divorced. The client now spends half the week with his mom and half the week with his dad. The client has a large scale repertoire, but is struggling with some tasks at his dad's new house. What should you focus on with your client? First things first, what is a scale repertoire? What is a repertoire? A repertoire is simply all the behaviors a client is capable of. That includes positive behaviors, that includes maladaptive behaviors, STEM behaviors. A repertoire is just a set of things. In this case, our client has a large set of skills. Okay. They're able to do a lot. What do we know about the client? Well, now they're spending half their week at mom's house and half the week in a new environment at dad's house. They're having issues at dad's house, engaging in these responses that they know. What is the issue here? What should you focus on? A, generalization. What is generalization? Generalization is engaging in a response outside of the learned or typical environment. If our client can engage in all these responses at mom's house, but then goes to dad's house and can't, he has failed to do what? Well, he's failed to generalize. We need to work on generalization. This was not an issue before when the client spent all his time in one environment. But if he's only able to do these skills in certain environments and not others, there's a big gap, right? So generalization is something we should certainly work on. A looks like our best answer. Let's read the rest of our answer choices and see why those are wrong or if we can find a better one. B, maintenance. Maintenance is a response enduring when teaching stops. Can the client still do these behaviors? Does the client still have these skills? Sure. At mom's house, he's able to do all these skills. Those skills are maintaining just fine. He's just not generalizing to other environments. So again, be careful with generalization and maintenance. What about functional communication? Is there any indication that this is a communication issue? Do we even know if the client can communicate? No, the question gives us no information regarding the client's level of communication or their ability to communicate. Therefore, we cannot pick C. You've got to go by what the question gives you. The information they give you is what you use to answer the question. And then D, frustration tolerance. If you've ever worked in this field or a similar field, you've probably heard frustration tolerance. The problem with frustration, quote unquote, it's not observable, it's not measurable. Okay. So yes, we might work on frustration tolerance. Okay. But one, in this question, there's no indication the client's upset. Okay. And two, frustration tolerance isn't going to be a great target for this type of need. The best thing to do is help our client start generalizing this large scale repertoire from mom's house to the new environment of dad's house. Relative to types of reinforcement, money would be considered blank, while food would be considered blank. Careful here. What type of reinforcements do we have? Well, we know we have positive and negative. But what else? How do we classify these? We classify them as primary or secondary. Primary just means unconditioned. We are born being reinforced by certain things, given enough deprivation. Food, water, comfort, all unconditioned, all primary. Secondary is conditioned. We need to learn that these things have reinforcing properties. Money, tokens, praise. So, relative to those classes of reinforcement or those types of reinforcement, money would be considered what? We just said it. It's going to be a secondary or a conditioned reinforcer. So let's find that in our answer choices. A, primary reinforcement. Is money primary? No, because it is learned. So we can eliminate A and B, leaves us with C and D, secondary and conditioned. Money is both secondary and conditioned. So now let's evaluate food. Food is what? Food is primary, it's unconditioned. Back to C, primary, perfect, right? Money is secondary, food is primary. If we look at D, it says money is conditioned, food is secondary, which we know is incorrect. Our answer here is C. Money is considered a secondary reinforcer or a conditioned reinforcer. Food is a primary reinforcer or an unconditioned reinforcer. Chad gets up from the couch and asks his friends, anybody want something to drink? Chad's friend says, I'll take a Sprite. Chad brings him back a Diet Coke. If Sprite and Diet Coke were both available in the fridge, Chad failed to do what? Pretty easy question. When we're trying to tell the difference between stimuli, what are we doing? That's all Chad needs to do. He needs to go to the fridge and do what? He needs to discriminate between Sprite and Diet Coke. It's just like teaching basic colors. I need you to discriminate between green and orange. If you can't discriminate. So Chad, okay, bringing back the Diet Coke instead of the Sprite, Chad failed to do what? A, listen. Would we ever assume that our client wasn't quote unquote listening? How do you measure listening? How do you observe listening? No, okay. It's not a good answer for an ABA exam. B, prompt. Did Chad fail to prompt? Well, no, there's no prompt required here, right? Chad simply just needs to go to the fridge, okay, and grab the Sprite instead of the Diet Coke. It's a simple discrimination problem, right? Chad failed to discriminate between Sprite and Diet Coke. Now, there could have been a million other variables, but based on the information we're given and based on our answer choices, the best we can do is assume Chad failed to discriminate. And that's part of the trick for the exam. You just got to go by the information they give you. Don't try to add information. Don't try to assume anything. Simply answer the question the best you can based on the given information. And then D, maintain. Did Chad fail to maintain getting drinks? Maybe. We're not sure. We're not sure about Chad's past history of grabbing drinks. Okay. The best answer here is going to be discriminate. Kind of a hard question. Okay. There's a lot of things that could have happened between Chad being told about the drink and grabbing the drink. But again, all we're going by is what we know from the question and picking the best answer, which in this case is C, discriminate. Chad could not tell the difference between our two stimuli. Which of the following statements is false in applied behavior analysis? Okay, if you get any sort of question like this where you're just simply identifying true or false statements, you really should be able to knock these out the park. Okay, if you prepared right. If you prepared well, you'll knock these out the park. So we're looking for the false statement, right? Which statement is false? Now we're going to assume what? We're going to assume 3 are true. So let's look at A. We never use punishment with clients. Is that true? Well, of course not. We absolutely use punishment with clients. Now, we need to go through certain steps before we use punishment. It's never really our first resort, first option, but we absolutely use punishment with clients. So A is false. Do we stop at A and move on? No, we read all of our answer choices. B, reinforcement is more effective than punishment at teaching replacement behaviors. Is that true? Absolutely. Punishment doesn't teach replacement behaviors. It's one of the issues with punishment. Reinforcement does. C, escape behavior is maintained through negative reinforcement. Is that true? Well, think about what you're trying to do when you are engaging in escape. You're trying to get something removed. So removal that increases behavior is what? Negative reinforcement. Therefore, escape behavior is maintained through negative reinforcement. That is also true. And then D, ethics should be considered when using punishment. Absolutely, 100% of the time, every ethical consideration should be taken into account before we implement punishment. D is true. That leaves us with A as our false statement. We never use punishment with clients. Not true. We certainly use punishment with our clients. A client often tantrums while in the grocery store with his dad. Your BCBA wants to determine the function of this behavior, so the BCBA sits down with the dad and asks what usually happens before and after the tantrum behavior occurs. What type of data is the BCBA taking? Again, what are we doing? We're attacking the question. Only move on to your answer choices once you've really analyzed and understood the question. Now, when I read that question, I think of two things. First thing I think of is ABC data. Why is that? Well, we're trying to figure out what happens before and after the behavior. That's the antecedents and consequences. Second thing I think of is this is an interview. And in an interview, what type of data is that? Is that direct data? No. What is direct data? Direct data is direct observation. We're actually observing the client engaging in a behavior or response. In this case, that's not what we're doing. We're interviewing the dad, but not actually seeing the client. So it's not direct. Is it indirect? Yes. Indirect is what? Indirect is not observing the client. Rather, it's interviewing or surveying, any other way of gathering data that doesn't involve observing the client. So what type of data is the BCBA taking? B, indirect. Keep reading. C, functional analysis. Like we talked about earlier, functional analysis involves manipulating antecedents and consequences. Also a direct type of observation, which we're not doing. And then D, frequency. Are we counting anything? No, right? Frequency is obviously not correct. So ABC data is not an option. The next best answer is going to be indirect data, which is B, indirect. Okay, so that's how we need to start attacking these questions, right? Be on the offense. Which of the following is not considered an antecedent to a behavior? Stop there. Ask yourself, what are known antecedents? What antecedents do I know? Well, we have motivating operations. That comes before a behavior. We have SDs. That comes before a behavior. We have prompts. That comes before a behavior. What comes after behaviors? Consequences. So going into these answer choices, what are we looking for? We're looking for some sort of consequence, of course. So A, prompt. Is a prompt an antecedent? Absolutely. A prompt occurs before a behavior. B, SD. Is an SD an antecedent? Absolutely. The SD is probably the most well-known type of antecedent, right? And evokes that behavior. C, MO. MOs come before the SDs and the prompts, so it's definitely an antecedent. Leaves us with D, reinforcement. Reinforcement is what? It's a consequence, not an antecedent. Since it's clearly not an antecedent, but yet a consequence, it is definitely not considered an antecedent to a behavior. So our answer here is going to be D. All right. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe. Check out RBT Exam Review for all of our study materials. Questions, comments, let me know. Happy to help. Other than that, work hard, study hard. See you soon.